Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at game number 13 of the 2024 FIDE World Chess Championship, which is taking place between Ding Liren from China and Gukesh from India. Now, the match has been very tense. There's been a lot of drama. We had a win in game 11 by Gukesh. We thought he was on his way to becoming the second Indian World Chess Champion, but then Ding struck back and won in game 12. So the score being all even at 6-6, everything is up in the air as we head into the final two games of the match. Now, for Gukesh, we've long thought that he's a slight underdog if this match is tied after regulation and it goes to tiebreakers. So with that in mind, this is the final game where Gukesh has the white pieces. Generally, it's a little bit easier to try and win when you have the white pieces, and as such, we are expecting Gukesh to go all in here and try to win this game. So Gukesh with the white pieces, he opens with the move e4, and now we get the move e6. Now, a lot of the pundits, including myself and the five-time world champion Magnus Carlsen, we were screaming for Gukesh to go into the French. We felt that it was the best opportunity for him to try and win. Now, you're probably wondering, why do we say that? The French opening is very solid. It has a good reputation. The reason is that the French has two specific characteristics. Now, the first one is that it does not lead to situations where pieces come off the board very quickly. So when we get this French with knight c3, knight f6, e5, knight d7, knight e2, c5, c3, knight c6, what you'll notice here is that all the pieces stay on the board. The rooks, the knights, the bishops stay on. No trades. Additionally, the pawn structure is a little bit imbalanced. They're chains both ways. White has a connect 4, black has a connect 3. And so when you combine the fact that all the pieces stay on the board alongside the pawn structure, that means that there are a lot of chances for the game to develop and become very interesting versus, say, a Berlin where there are a lot of traded pieces early on. So after knight c6, we get the move a3, and this is the first deviation in the match. In game number 1, Gukesh played the move f4 and went on to lose spectacularly. So today he decides to play the move a3. Now, there are a lot of these positions out of this Steinitz variation of the French, or even the semi-trash as well, or the trash, I should say. In the trash, there are a lot of setups where you put a knight on e2, and later on you put a knight on f3. And there are many situations like this where you will play a3 as well to stop a bishop b4 or a knight b4. So this a3 move might look a little bit unusual, but it actually has a long-term goal of stopping the knight or the bishop from using the square. Now here, Ding has used no time so far. He's clearly in preparation, but he spends 19 minutes before playing this move, bishop e7. Now, one of the things that's very abundantly clear to me is that when Ding Liren said that he had only been preparing for 3 weeks before the match, he was being honest. It's clear that he did not have time or issues or whatever else was going on. He did not spend many months preparing, so it comes as no surprise that we get another French. However, even though it's been played twice, there are a lot of variations within the French. You can't be ready for everything. And on top of that, Ding Liren is not a traditional French player. For most of his career, against pawn to king 4, also known as e4, he played e5 and nothing else. I guess he did play the Caro-Kann a little bit as well, but the French was not in his repertoire. So he's trying to play an opening that he traditionally is not familiar with, very little experience, since he also doesn't play e4 from the white side. And in a world championship match, you're really worried that he'll get out-prepared. So after bishop e7, we get the move bishop to e3 being played, and now we have the move knight b6. Now, Ding here spends 40 minutes before playing knight b6, and for literally the millionth time in this match, he is down 1 hour on the clock, and we're on move number 8. Now, as I've said in many of my recaps, frankly, I'm shocked by this time usage from Ding. You feel like sooner or later it's got to catch up with him since they're playing a time control without increment. Now, another note that I will point out is that the time control for the World Championship has been shifting over the years. They shifted from increment to no increment. Even this match in 2024 is already quite a bit shorter than the 2021 match that was played between Magnus and Nepo. Keep in mind, there was that epic, I think, 6th game, which went something like 7 or 7.5 hours. That is not possible with the new time control. So after knight b6 here, we get this move knight to f4, and knight b6 is already a start in the wrong direction. Now, what I think happened here is you're thinking, well, why did he go bishop e3? Why did he go knight f3 or f4? Now, when we use computers to study chess, we come up with a lot of different original ideas, and it's very clear the idea behind bishop e3 is, let's say black castles, white can go knight to f4 here, and now you can no longer go for a classic pawn break with f6 to challenge the central pawns, because then you lose the pawn, the queen and the rook get forked, and very quickly you simply lose the game. So you can't go f6, and on top of that, white has this very compact center. There's no bishop b4, a3 stops that, and down the road, if white can finish his development with bishop d3 and h4 followed by knight g5, or bishop takes h7, all of white's pieces are aiming towards the black king on g8, and black is actually completely lost in this position. So Ding ends up spending 40 minutes before playing knight b6. I think the reason he plays this move is very fundamental in that, first of all, white has played a3. So you want to jump to c4, use a knight, create a bash, and attack the bishop and the pawns. But on top of that as well, let's just say white plays a move like knight f3. You can also consider playing f6 now because the bishop guards the pawn. So dual purpose move here. You maybe want to go knight c4, the bishop guards the pawn, so now f6 an idea. However, this is imprecise. Now Gukesh plays move knight to f4 after a 2-minute think. He still appears to be in preparation. I really like this quick move because white could always try to play f4, but you think to yourself, why does the computer want a3 and bishop e3? What is the reasoning? The reasoning is this square on f4 is available. You might as well put the horse there. So we get knight f4. Ding trades on d4, and now he goes for knight to c4 here, immediately jumping with the knight towards the center of the board, attacking the bishop and the pawn. And now we get the move bishop takes knight. Now this move is the correct move, but you will notice here already Ding is once again going into the situation where he plays something that I think he knows is a little bit dubious, but it does take his opponent Gukesh out of preparation. Now throughout this match, when the players have been on equal footing where there's no preparation involved, generally speaking, I would say that Ding has been the better player, but because of preparation, he's ended up in a lot of trouble in many games. So this is a sort of what I would call a calculated risk, where he thinks, okay, Gukesh out of prep, I can outplay him. It's not too different from something that Magnus Carlsen does quite frequently, where he'll play slightly dubious openings, might be a touch worse, but he sort of assumes his opponent can't play like a 3500 computer and that the eval bar is simply drunk. So after knight c4, we get takes here. White could play queen g4 right away potentially, or knight f3, but frankly going knight f3 and sacking a pawn is just not very human. So we get takes, and now Gukesh plays this move knight g to e2 very, very quickly, and this is the first move that is a serious inaccuracy. Now what I suspect is Gukesh was out of prep. He had to have known that this was not the best computer line, but the thing is, at the end of the day, you have to be very careful with preparation, because when you play lines that you know the computer loves for one side, but you don't have it all worked out, remember, we are humans, or as Neo would say, Agent Smith would say, he is still only human. So we can look at the evaluation bar, we can study with computers, but at the end of the day, we can't play like a computer plays, at least not yet. And so you have to be very careful when you do that, because in a game when you don't know what the best move is, it's very hard to figure it out, even if you know your opponent has made a blunder. I've had it happen in many cases where I blitz out some prep, 15 moves deep, move 16, my opponent plays a move that I know is not one of the top 2 computer lines, and already right there I'm like, what's going on? I know I'm better, but why am I better? And then I have to sort of resign myself to the fact that I know a computer thinks it's better, but I have to play as a human and hope that I can figure out something. So queen g4 would have been a very strong move here from Gukesh. Now keep in mind, it's very sharp and complicated. There are a lot of sharp lines. One line is black takes the juicer, hoping to go for a classic fork of the king and the rook here. White ends up castling. You get knight b3, king b1, queen c7, takes, rook f8. And now after this move knight to f3, white is quite a bit better here. But again, you can't know whether white is better without actually studying this with the computer, and without knowing the evaluation. It's very hard to go into this, because black has moves like c3. Black can also play bishop d7 and try to castle here, and just in general, your king on the queen side feels a little bit weak here, and black also has the 2 Bs. So without knowing, it's hard to really be super critical of Gukesh for not playing queen g4, but I think the fact that he only uses 2 minutes on this move is a big mistake, because he's already built a 40-minute time advantage, and there's certain moments where you sort of intuitively have to sense that it's time to stop and try to take stock of the position. But we get knight g to e2, and now we have the move b5 from Ding. We get castles, now we get castles, and here we have the move knight c3. Ding goes rook b8, and at this point, we're now officially in the middle game. Players are 100% on their own, and let's take a look at what's going on. Now, one thing that's very important in chess is to look at the pawn structure, and we have this structure where white has the pawns on d4 and e5 versus c4 and b5. Now, if black can get b4, something like rook c1, b4 takes here, black is doing very well, because there's this outpost on d5 down the road, there's an open b file, and the pawn on c4 supports a knight d3 thrust. Now you're probably thinking, why am I mentioning pawn structure? The reason is that even though there are some small differences in this position here after rook b8, it's very similar to a specific line in the Queen's Gambit decline that I've actually played against Magnus Carlsen. I beat him with it a couple of times back in 2020, which is the Vienna. So the Vienna goes d4, d5, c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, dc4, e4, b5. And the point is, down the road, you end up in a position something like this, where let's just say you get this, for example, I'll play rook c1 and knight c6, and you'll notice here that white has overextended the pawns to d4 and e5, and black has these pawns on c7 and c4. Now on top of that, black can go rook b8 down the road, try to play on the open file, but mostly the play is very similar because you're always trying to fight for this d5 square or go f6 to challenge the white center. So back to the game here. In this position, let's go back here. We got this position after rook to b8. You'll notice it's the same pawn structure. Black is trying to play b4. The one issue for black, however, is that white can try to attack on the king side very quickly. So if white is able to mask the pieces, let's just say you get D's knights here, something like bishop b7 and queen g4. Suddenly white has a very powerful attack with D's knights and the queen. The bishop can even go to h6, and black is under tremendous pressure. So after rook to b8, it's really a question of, can Ding play on the b file or challenge the center with f6 very quickly, or will Gukesh be able to use D's knights and checkmate the black king? So here we get this move knight to h5, which I really like, and now we get the move f5. Now it's important to note here, we look at the time situation. Because Ding has mismanaged his time and he's down so much right away, he doesn't have a lot of time to think already, and he has to start making quick decisions. Now I think if Ding had an hour on the clock or more, he probably would think for 20 minutes. Maybe he would find the best line, which is king to h8, because after queen g4 and rook g8, black aims to play f5 and then open up the g file for the rook, use the diagonal for the bishop, and create some serious attacking chances. But he's mismanaged his time, so he has to start moving quicker, and therefore he plays the pretty intuitive human move pawn to f5, trying to stop queen g4. Here Gukesh plays the glitch move pawn takes pawn. This is of course what's known as end peasant according to XQC. He plays pawn takes pawn. We get the glitch move, and now we have bishop takes pawn being played, and here Gukesh plays queen f3. Now very rich position, a lot of play for both sides here. You're probably thinking, wait, the queen attacks the knight, but black can take the pawn, right? Takes. Black has an extra pawn in the center of the board. Gukesh blunders a pawn, he's just losing the game, right? Well, not so fast. Now after knight takes d4, which is the best move, by the way, white has the in-between trick, knight takes bishop. If you take with the queen, I trade the queens and win the knight. If you take with the pawn, I go check, winning the horse on d4. And if you play the move rook takes f6, the best move, now I go queen d1, and after e5, bishop g5, suddenly I'm winning this tower on f6, but the computer shows that after bishop to f5, sacking the rook, takes in this position, black is doing quite well. You've got a knight and a pawn for the rook. You also have a bastion combined with another bastion on d3 for the bishop, and black should be completely fine. So after queen to f3, I think if Ding has more time, he probably thinks, but again, with no increment already here, you have to be very diligent in your time usage because you just can't afford to get too low. So we have the move queen to e8 being played, a nice move guarding the horse on c6 and potentially attacking the horse on h5. Here Gukesh trades on f6, and now he goes queen to e2, and here we get the move queen g6. Now at this point, it feels like the dust has settled to some degree here. Material is even, feels like both sides have mostly completed their development, but there is one big issue in the position. Now for black, what you would love to do is you would love to get this position with the knight on e7, a bishop on b7, followed by rook to f8 with a double stack, the diagonal, the pin on the file, or even something like knight to d5 or f5, for example, with the knight. All your pieces have achieved perfect harmony here, and black is probably quite a bit better. But it's not so easy to achieve that because first of all, in this position, after rook a d1 here, if you were to play bishop b7, for example, white can go f3. If you were to take on b5, by the way, there's knight takes pawn with the classic double a battery and a fossil to win the game. But after white goes f3, you have to worry about this pawn, and when you play a move like a6, now white can go knight to e4, followed by either knight c5 or knight d6, and white's knight is jumping all over the place. The diagonal is somewhat closed, and there's still a lot of play in the position. Now, of course, you'll see from the eval bar that it's fine for black, but this is the one big question. Can Ding put the bishop on the diagonal without losing this pawn and without allowing the center of the board to explode? So after queen to g6, we get this move f3 here from Gukesh, and now Ding spends a bit of time before, or not a bit of time, sorry, plays rook f8 right away. We get rook a d1, and now he spends quite a bit of time before making a huge blunder with this move knight e7. Now in this position, the computer loves to move rook to f5, and primarily it's because that after rook d1, you can go bishop b7, and the rook guards the juicer, so you're not hanging the pawn. But Ding plays rook f8, natural human move. We get rook d1, and now you'll notice that you still can't put the bishop on b7 because you hang the pawn on b5. So here we got the move knight to e7 being played, And now this is a mistake because of the great move bishop to f4. Now you're thinking, wait, bishop f4, what's going on? Gukesh has hung a bishop, he's losing the game, what's wrong with him? However, if black were to take the bishop, there's queen to e5 here, and it's one of the rarest tactics you see in chess, with the queen attacking two towers. The towers are split. You'd love to put the rook on f8, but there's a bishop in the way. Rook would love to go back and guard the rook, but either way, with this bishop in the way, you can't guard both of the towers. You're going to lose one of them and the game. Now, I suspect that Ding missed this move. I haven't seen the press conference yet, but I suspect that he spent this time. He didn't see bishop f4 and he thought, you know what? I'm going to go knight d5, knight f5, bishop b7. Everything is super Gucci here. I can't end up in trouble. But Gukesh finds this move quickly, and this also speaks to making adjustments throughout the match. Now, one thing that Ding has been doing throughout the entire match is he's been mismanaging his time, getting super low in every game, and I feel like at times Gukesh has been unable to start moving quicker, trying to press Ding on the clock as well as on the board. I feel he's been a little bit too rigid and trying to look for the absolute best moves versus trying to be practical. But here it feels like between the last couple of games, game 11 specifically, and now this game 13, he's trying to pick up the tempo, he's trying to master the tempo and put pressure on the clock as well. So we got rook b6. Now we have bishop c7 attacking the rook, and here Ding plays move rook b7. Now it's a very dicey situation for Ding because he's running low on time already, and for Gukesh all of his moves are very easy. You want to attack the pawn, maybe knight e4, maybe bishop d6, maybe d5. All the moves are reactionary, so for Gukesh here, he knows it's an easy position to play without any risk, and for Ding, he's gonna have to defend like a beast. Now the computer says after rook c6, knight takes pawn, bishop to a6, and bishop d6, rook f5. Black is completely fine here, but frankly, we're in a spot where you already can't really afford to use 10 or 15 minutes, and so Ding doesn't see this idea. It's frankly not very human or natural to go for this line with rook b5, followed by c3 to open up the diagonal, and instead he plays rook b7. Logical move. You still guard the pawn, and you attack the bishop. We get to move bishop to d6, and now we have the move rook to e8. Now you will notice computer at this point giving Gukesh a very serious advantage here, but it's a very tricky position because frankly we are not 3500s, and the concepts here as they exist are quite unusual. Now here we got the move bishop takes knight by Gukesh, and I think this is a mistake here. I understand why he played it from a practical standpoint, but he should have played the move rook fe1 here, trying to line up the rooks and prepare to push p with d5. Probably the reason he didn't do it is because he saw knight to f5 and he thought bishop to e5, something like a6, and white can't be that much better. Now this is why we are not computers, because when I look at this position after knight f5 and you see the pawns on d4 and e6, the obvious thought is you want to go bishop to e5, creating the classic wooden shield here in the middle of the board. But the computer of course doesn't care, and it says after bishop b4 you want to simply move the knight to e4 and use either the c5 or d6 squares for the horse, and white is much better, maybe even winning from a technical standpoint, but it should be very good at any rate. So instead Gukesh goes bishop e7. Now this is a move that I completely understand. One thing that's really important to know is when you play blitz, specifically like 3-0 blitz online, the value of knights versus bishops, knights tend to be worth quite a bit more because the squares for the knights are a little bit more obvious. And after we get takes in this position, queen e5, Gukesh is hoping to use the knight, maybe put the rook in the center of the board. The knight is much better than this bishop, and therefore it should be a lot easier to play, and you have great chances to pressure Ding on the board but also on the clock. So now we got the move a6 being played here, a great move from Ding, guarding the pawn on b5. Not the reason I say great is because it's very tough here. You're running a little bit low on time. You can see the knight jumping to the center. There's a lot of danger here with the rooks and the knight. It's very hard to be precise, but he does find a6. Now Gukesh plays d5, and this is a move that I don't necessarily hate as a general idea, but if I were playing here I probably would have looked for something a little bit trickier, like maybe rook e1 here. Try to avoid simplifying the position with d5 right away so that black doesn't have an instant move and black still has this bad bishop on c8. We get d5 instead, we get takes, and now we have the move queen e6. Now you will notice the eval bar continuing to give Gukesh a bigger and bigger advantage at this point, but it's not so easy to play. Now the computer here actually wanted king to h8 as a move. King h8 is also fine, but it's very hard to do this because you're very close to walking into something like a classic ice skater with check rook e8 and rook e1 here, for example. After bishop e6 you survive because the queen guards both the bishop and the rook. If you were to take the queen, of course, just to illustrate the point, this is the classic ice skater checkmate, king stuck on the back rank. Once again, big shout out to XQC for coming up with such a legendary term. So after queen takes d5, we get to move queen to e6. Now we have queen c5, and here Ding plays the move rook e8. Now at this point, Gukesh plays move rook to e1, and I love this decision here because this is already a 50-50 situation. Now, if Ding has 30 minutes on the clock here, for example, I think he very easily would be able to trade the queen for the 2 towers here, because after king f2, rook e8, and knight e4, you're probably thinking, uh-oh, wait, there's knight d6. The bishop and the rooks are all getting forked. I'm going to lose the game. Sample line, you go rook b8, knight d6, rook d8 here. After queen d5, you run into the classic smothered checkmate where white sacks the queen, and then there's knight f7, checkmate in the king in the corner of the board. So you probably see knight e4 and you're like, you're freaking out. There's knight d6. If I go here, there's check, winning the rook on b7. There's really nothing I can do and I lose the game, right? With 8 minutes on the clock, no increment, you're never going to see this defense or resource, I should say, in this position with the black pieces. But if you have 30 minutes, you probably will. Now, Ding did not play this because I'm sure he saw this position and he thought he was lost, but the computer shows it after move rook b to e7, stacking the towers. After knight to d6 here, thinking, uh-oh, rook and bishop, I'm losing the game. But you have this very unusual tactic with rook to e5, attacking the queen. Queen goes up, you go back with the rook. Queen goes back, you go back. And if the queen goes to c6, you have rook 5 to e6, pinning the queen once again. So no matter where the queen goes on the c file, you will always attack it with this tower. You just do the yo-yo mob between e6, e5, and e7. If the queen ever goes away, you can move the rook, and now the bishop is guarded by the rook, and the queen is offsides, and it doesn't attack the bishop. So we end up in a situation here where after rook d to e1, you're thinking that Ding is in a 50-50. If he doesn't see it, he loses the game. And sure enough, Ding makes a massive blunder with this move, queen to f7. Now, I don't blame him for playing it. I think seeing that whole line with rook e5 is very hard. But this is a move after which Gukesh should win the game and likely go on to become the world champion. So now here Gukesh is 1348 versus 804, and he plays this move knight to e4 after a 1 minute think, and this is a move that is a huge mistake. Now in this position, what Gukesh should have played, he should have traded the towers and played the move knight to e4 here, and now frankly black is very close to loss. A sample line would be rook to d7, knight d6, forking the bishop and the queen. Black goes queen to d8 here, and you're probably thinking, well, knight takes bishop, rook c7, black wins the knight or the queen and saves the game. But here white can go queen d5 check, king f8, and now you have the move rook to d1, and at this point white is simply much better with all the pieces stacked on the file. I guess queen f5 maybe is a little bit better, but the point remains black is under serious pressure. So this is what Gukesh should have played. Now I will say, however, that at this point the nerves and the pressure are probably playing a huge role. It's been a very long match, but also one thing is when you're trying to push your opponent around on the clock, you don't want to get too low on time. You don't want to allow trades of pieces, and so he goes knight e4. Now this is still a 50-50 situation. I was getting ready to do my recap around this point in the game because I expected Ding to crack the way that he did the other day in game number 11 when he got down to 7 minutes. But in this position, there was one and only one move to not lose the game on the spot, and Ding shows why he is currently the world champion. He finds the only move to not lose the game, which is rook to f8. Now one other move that you're probably thinking would work is rook c7, attacking the queen, but here white can go knight f6 check, forking the king and the rook, and when you take and I take your rook, if you take the rook, you lose this rook. Now it's a rook versus bishop. White will win the game, so you can't do that. If you can't go rook c7, well, let's just say you play, I don't know, a5, there's knight d6, and here we end up with a classic family fork. You're forking the 2 towers, the queen and the bishop. Everything is getting forked. It's a very bad situation for everyone involved, and this is not going to be a good thing. So in this position here, Ding finds the only move, which is rook to f8, allowing the family fork, because after knight d6 is played, now even though the queen, the rook, and the bishop are being forked, there's rook to c7 here, breaking the pin. Now you attack the queen, even though your queen's under attack. And at this point, miraculously, Liren has survived. He's still marginally worse, mind you, but the worst in this position is long gone here, and he should be able to save the game. So now we get the move queen to e5, and here Ding goes queen to f6. At this point, if we get any trades due to the even number of pawns on the board, this will be GG. So we get queen d5. Now we have king h8. Worth pointing out, queen f6 a very tough move, but the last really critical move in the game to find, because it'd be easy to think that white can go knight e8, forking the queen and the rook to win the game, but you can slide the queen over, check the king, and then move your rook to d7, and now you're completely fine. So we get the move rook e5, and now it's a matter of can Ding play 5 more good moves, get to time control. If he can do that without blundering, he will not lose this game. So we get rook to e7, we have rook fe1, takes, and now Ding plays move h6, a great resource here, creating the lift for the king on h7. No more ice skater checkmates in play, and at this point Ding should draw the game. So we get queen to c5, bishop to d7, and now we have the move knight e4. Here Ding goes queen to f4, we get rook e7, and now we have bishop f5. And at this point we have reached move number 41. Both players have completed their 40th moves. Players get an extra 30 minutes on the clock, and when you look at the even material on the board here, Black has survived. Ding will not lose this game anymore, and with that he will not be trailing heading into the final game of the match. So here we get queen d4, rook g8 played by Ding to guard the juicer. We get h3, queen c1, king f2, and now we get the trade of the bishop for the knight. Rook takes, and the excellent move c3. Now white is maybe a little bit better here because the pawns on the queen side are a little bit weaker potentially versus the 3-on-2 on the king side, but the main point is that Ding has a way to simplify the position where if all these pawns come off on the queen side, this is a theoretical draw. So we get c3. Here Gukesh plays pawn takes pawn. He could have played queen takes, but after takes rook c8 here. If white goes rook e3, there's rook c4 and rook to a4 to win the pawn. And if you play rook e6, takes rook b3, king g3, b4, this is going to lead to the classic 3 versus 2, which will occur in the game. So we get pawn takes pawn, queen takes pawn, king g3, and now we get queen b3 to stop rook to e6. If you go a5, a4, for example, there's rook takes pawn, and it's spaghetti-o time. King gets checkmated on h8. So we get queen b3 to stop rook e6. We get rook e7, a5, rook b7, and now we get the move queen c4. Here we have the move queen e5 being played. You could play queen takes queen, but after takes, rook a7, rook d8, takes, rook d3, actually sorry, wrong order, sorry, rook b8, not d8, rook a5, and rook b3. Again, we're headed for a rook and pawn endgame that will be a draw. So we get queen e5, now we get the move queen c6. Here we get queen takes pawn, and now Ding plays queen takes pawn. We get rook a7, check, king h2, and queen b4. And at this point, Gukesh will win this pawn on a5, but we are ending up in this theoretically drawn endgame with a 3 versus 2 pawn structure on the king side. Now it's worth noting that while I was doing my live stream on Kick, I did actually play this position against the computer Stonkfish in the queen and pawn endgame. And in this queen and pawn endgame with queen and 3 versus queen and 2, you can try to play on and maybe win this with some mistakes. I did in fact lose this to Stockfish, but it's only if you get the queen and pawn endgame that you could win. I did play the rook and pawn endgame against Stockfish, and I drew it very easily. So at this point, if you could get the endgame with only queens, you can win, but here that's not the case. We got the trade, rook b7, and now we're getting the endgame where Gukesh is +1 pawn, but this is a draw because all rook and pawn endgames are drawn. So we get rook a8, takes, rook a2, king g3, king h7. Now we get rook b5, king g6. Here we got f4, king f6, and now we have the move king to f3 being played. Now after king to f3 is played in this position here, we now get the move rook to c2, and here Gukesh plays the move g3. Now the reason this is drawn is that Black will always keep the rook on the second or the third ranks to check the king and try to win the pawn on g3 or h3. So here we get the move rook c3. Now we have the move king to g4 being played, and after king g4 we get rook to a3. Gukesh, I should say, Ding keeps the rook on the third rank. We get the move h4. Now we have rook c3, rook b6, king f7, and now we get the move f5. Now it's in this position that if you can get a little bit of luck here, if Black were to say play rook c4, king h5, let's say rook c3, g4, and something like rook c2, you can actually win this position because after rook b7 check, if king g8 is played, you have the move f6, takes, and after king g6, you're going to win both the pawns on f6 and h6 and the game. Unfortunately, in this position, it's Black's turn, and against a player of Ding's caliber, there's really no way that Ding will make the blunder. So here Ding plays a great move, pawn to h5, checking the king on g4. If you take, this is also a very simple draw. King is cut off here. You can maybe go rook g6, but even this is just an easy draw here. Pawn versus pawn, nothing special happening. So we get the move king to f4. Now after king to f4, we get the move rook c4 check, and here Gukesh decides to give up on any chance of winning. King g5, rook g4 is obviously a draw. If you go king to e5, you can start tickling the king all over the board, and then you go rook g4, rook b3, king f6, and here with the rook attacking the pawns, king attacking the pawn on f5, this also will be very peaceful. So in this position, we get the move king f3, and now we have check being played here, and now after check, king f4 check, king to f3, the game ends in a draw by threefold repetition. Ding survives miraculously yet again. I swear Ding is like the cat with 7 lives, or cat with 9 lives, I should say. He has been under pressure, it seems like, in every single Black game, but every game he continues to hang on and get the draw and not lose the match. So amazing defense from Ding. I would say for Gukesh, you're probably very disappointed here. He had his chance to win both in the opening. He could have played queen g4 later on. If he had used his time, trade the rooks and gone knight e4, that was another golden opportunity to seal the deal and probably ensure that he becomes the next world champion. At any rate, his execution has been shaky throughout the match in spite of getting all these great positions, and Ding lives on to fight another day. The match now is tied by a score of 6.5 to 6.5, headed into the 14th and final game tomorrow, where Ding Liren will have the white pieces. At this point, I would give my prediction, which is Ding is the clear favorite here. If Ding doesn't do something insane, he has a chance to try and win with white, but even if it's a draw, he should be the favorite in rapid as well. So everything is looking up for Ding in spite of all the opportunities and all the mishaps and close scares he's had. So it's remarkable to see Ding showing the heart of a world champion still in the match as we head into the final game where he has the white pieces. So things are looking great for Ding. For Gukesh, he's got to put together a good game with black tomorrow, shore up the defenses, and try to make it into the tiebreak. So it's going to be really, really exciting. But at any rate, that's going to do it for today with our recap from the 13th game. Matches all square. We obviously will be doing a recap tomorrow after game 14. But on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below. And we'll be back with a recap, the press conference, everything else as we head into the pivotal final game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.